So the setup of the Shrouded Isle is this. You play as the political and religious leader of a small village on a dying island. In this desolate and doomed landscape, the player is asked to guide the people forward by ensuring the community upholds its virtues. And those virtues may not be what you'd typically expect. Fervor, discipline, penitence, obedience, and ignorance. The thing is, it's less a traditional religion and more of an apocalyptic Lovecraftian cult waiting for the arrival of their god, Chernabog. And that elder god has whispered to you in your dreams that the community can be saved so long as you purge it of sin before Chernabog awakens in just 5 years. That gives you 20 seasons to find the sinners, sacrifice them to appease the slumbering god, and save your village, or at least whatever will be left of it. Gameplay-wise, the Shrouded Isle feels most like a single-player hidden identity board game with some real light roguelike elements. The game is played in rounds that take up a season in the game's universe. Each season you pick one advisor from each of the 5 houses of the village, with each house responsible for upholding one of the virtues. For example, the Caldwells oversee discipline while the Kegney enforce ignorance. Then once you've picked your advisors from each family, you can give them tasks each month, encourage ignorance by burning books, or encourage penitence by whipping sinners. Then, at the end of the season, you pick one of the 5 selected advisors to sacrifice to Chernabog. The goal is to have identified the sinner Chernabog is asked for in your dreams, and then sacrifice them, but if you haven't figured out who they are yet, or can't really make an educated guess, your next best move is to sacrifice based on the political or cultural concerns you have going on. See, what makes Shrouded Isle interesting is that you are constantly trying to balance 3 needs at once. First, you have to make sure your community's virtues are all held at acceptable levels. If they fall below their thresholds for more than one turn, your game ends. You have lost Chernabog's favor and the dark times have come. So keeping your people pious is of the utmost importance, but you also have to balance that against the politics of the 5 families. If you ignore their contributions for too long, or investigate too deeply into their lives, or sacrifice too many of their people in a row, they may grow rebellious, and then you lose again. Finally, while trying to keep the community's values and the political environment stable, you're trying to identify these individual sinners that Chernabog has asked for. If you haven't cleared them all by the time Chernabog wakes up, then bad things happen. And your actions, from who you sacrifice to who you choose to do work and how much work you let them do, all have play into these different systems. Each family member has one virtue, which confers bonuses whenever they're used as an advisor, and one vice, which hurts another virtue when they're used. That vice might be something comparatively minor. They may be imaginative, or slovenly, or stubborn, or just a teenager, and that hurts the virtues that those are related to, but they aren't really sacrificial sins. And if you sacrifice someone for those, it hurts less than if you just sacrifice somebody for literally no reason, but the families will still be pretty outraged. Then there's the bigger stuff, being a liar, or a pervert, or a coward, or a thief. These are sins that take huge chunks out of the other virtues when you use these people as advisors, and they're also the sorts of sinners that Chernabog asks you to sacrifice. But you won't know anyone's vice or virtue until it's revealed to you. This is the hidden identity part of the game. You unveil their personalities in a couple of ways. Observing their actions as advisors can reveal them, as can the outcome of random events. But the most common and most direct way is by investigating them during the advisor selection phase, sending out inquisitors to research a specific person to make sure that they fit your profile. The better standing you're in with the family, the more investigations you can do per turn, but the more you do, the more they kinda mind it. These investigations can reveal someone's virtues, which let you help plan on how you keep your society functioning and all your people pious, but they can also be used to reveal the vices that help you identify who you need to sacrifice. It takes 2 reveals to fully know someone's true vice or virtue. On first glance, you might find out that they may know too much, which means that they have the vice of neglecting ignorance. But does that mean they're the scholar you're after sacrificing, or just that they're an imaginative sort? You can sacrifice them with minimal evidence if you want, but you could be wrong. Anger a family for sacrificing someone without due cause, waste a turn, and have killed someone for a lesser crime. Oh, and one tip while you're looking for sinners, pay attention to the pronoun used by Chernabog in your dreams about who to find. As far as I can tell, the pronoun doesn't show up anywhere else in the UI, but it's a convenient way to narrow down who you should be looking at for likely sinners. As for the roguelike qualities, it's quite possible to fail the game midway through and be forced to start over. You only have one game active at a time and only one save slot, so your decisions all carry weight. And like a roguelike, the Shrouded Isle is often driven by random events, chance encounters that present opportunities to curry favor with individual houses, or to stoke any one of the 5 virtues higher to stave off the wrath of your god. For example, someone might be sneaking cookies to the people you're currently trying to cleanse in your tower dungeon. Do you keep the cookies for yourself to encourage obedience to you, and let people know who's boss? Let the Blackborn Inquisitor do their job to gain the favor of that house? Or simply decree to decrease village rations since they seem to have extra food, thus increasing discipline? Other times, random events may reveal someone's personal vice or virtue by way of interacting with them, or even change what their personality types are. For example, when I kept the cookies, I found out that Laszlo Iofska was generous, a vice I will have to wean him from indulging. Anyways, it should be obvious at this point that the game is interested in critiquing religion, but it's not really about criticizing faith, per se. Or if it is, it's more complicated than simply God existing or not existing, but we'll get back to that. More than anything, it's a criticism of religion as a socio-political system. It skewers religion as an organization and social institution aimed at dominating and controlling culture and behavior, rather than religion as a search for meaning or truth. The specific convictions themselves aren't as important as underscoring the hypocrisy that enforcing them brings about. After all, it is not always the most sinful who is executed in this game. You have to weigh each sacrifice's impact to the community's virtues, and the politics of how each selection plays out with each house. It is often most convenient for everyone involved to pick someone accused of a lesser vice from a family that is currently in good standing with your leadership than it is to punish a terrible sinner whose death would push their family into open rebellion and doom the village. Similarly, sometimes you know you're looking for a thief and there's a person in your advisors who is disobedient and you think he's guilty but you can't prove it, and then, well, mistakes happen. The game's got a lot of little touches that put you in this religious zealot's mindset. First and foremost is the monochrome art style, which sells the absolutist nature of the cult's worldview, one that views almost all behaviors as either pious or sinful, who views the future of their people as either salvation or damnation. And while you can change the colors it uses, the default is a sickly yellow-green on gray-brown affair that is at once vibrant and also kind of overwhelming to look at for too long. And really, the vomit and bile look underscores the belief that there is an illness in this community that only bloodletting will cure. The only time the game ever breaks from these hues is during the sacrifices themselves, streams and pools of crimson, the only thing pushing back against the green-brown sickness. The music also has this wonderful Diablo-y, Tristram-y feel to it, a sickly, meandering guitar tune that feels right at home for a game about a village sitting on top of an ancient evil. But as much as I love the game's aesthetics, it also puts you into this mindset mechanically. At one point, one of the teenagers in my town began to wear ornate and unorthodox new fashions. I could punish the young woman for her ostentatious display of self-importance and reinforce the community's sense of obedience, or I could investigate the matter further by talking with her about it, but with potentially unknown consequences. This is a great way to encapsulate this worldview, this fundamental fear of the new and different. Mechanically, the game says, here is this new thing. We could destroy the new thing and ensure our values are preserved, or we can see where this goes, but bad things may happen to our precious virtues if we do. Who knows what could happen? The game hides its information from you to get you to play from a restrictive, conservative religious leader's mindset. But while the game mechanically encourages a reflexive fear of the unknown, the in-game text is basically, some of the young kids are wearing new clothes. Should they be punished? For which the answer is obviously no. And that's what I really love about this game. It gets you into this horrible black and white absolutist mindset by the nature of its playstyle, but it's written in such a way that the terribleness of what you're defending is plain on its face. You are regularly sacrificing the innocent, starving the denizens to teach them the value of discipline, sending inquisitors to investigate innocent families, and burning art and outside knowledge to prevent anyone from getting ideas. But it manages to frame your actions in such a way that it isn't the usual, do this bad thing so I can yell at you for doing it shtick. This was a big criticism of something like, say, Spec Ops: The Line, which more or less forced you to do abhorrent things and then condemned you for doing them. The Shrouded
toxic. Your mouth.
The Shrouded Isle avoids feeling as manipulative by not making it about any one decision or even about you in particular. The game isn't mad that you sacrificed a person per se, it's mad that the entire system is set up in such a way that not only are there sacrifices, but often you see sacrifices that don't line up with the values of the religion that the sacrifices are meant to protect in the name of political expediency. These systems, and by extension the organizations they represent, are in the game's view inherently hypocritical and corrupt. They feed into one another. another. The Church's desire for cultural conformity necessitate its political endeavors, and its political endeavors necessitate violating its own values from time to time in pursuit of a more perfect society overall. Consequently, you have a church that insists it stands for these specific values, and it expects all of the townfolk to suffer greatly in order to uphold them, but the church itself is more than willing to bend its own rules in the name of achieving its objectives. The Shrouded Isle does not like religion, but it is outright contemptuous of what it views as organized religion's inbuilt hypocrisy. At its most bitter, the game uses its virtues to show how the cult reinforces itself as an entity. This is where it comes closest not just to criticizing organized religion as a socio-political construct, but as an actual system of beliefs. The virtues themselves self-perpetuate this corrupt system by keeping people inured to it. Ignorance keeps people in the dark about other ways of thinking about the world. Fervor is used to stoke feelings of righteousness and divine right. Discipline suggests that suffering pleases Chernabog. Penitence plants seeds of guilt as its punishments draw blood. Obedience emphasizes subservience to Chernabog's, and by extension your, will. These virtues are not in service to a greater good, but ultimately in service to the religion's control of the people. It is not interested in their salvation, it is interested in its own self-preservation. Let's not mince words. The game was made by a Canadian development team, and it's hard not to see Western religion, and in particular Christianity, as the thinly veiled target here. And on one hand, it's hardly a fair portrait, exaggerated to the point of near parody as this bloodletting cult of doom. On the other hand, as the predominant religious influence in Western culture, driving plenty of political will towards its aims and often hurting people in the process, intentionally or not, it's hard not to see some of these criticisms as absolutely valid. That's not to say there aren't missteps. I'm not super enthusiastic about the Sunken Sins update, which introduced a tower to quarantine citizens acting suspiciously. It takes everything a step too far into Lovecraftian fantasy by introducing contagious ailments described as things like psychosis and hallucinations, and walks right into the troubling implications of Lovecraftian quote-unquote madness. Yeah, I get that drowning someone because they're depressed or mentally ill is meant to be more of an overt criticism of religious organizations thinking that they can quote-unquote fix behaviors they find deviant, and yeah, if anything, this draws more overt parallels between this monstrous cult and modern Western Christianity, but the connotations brought about by framing things like depression as Lovecraftian madness, and indeed as a contagion, just rubbed me wrong, even if in universe it made sense, and metaphorically it made sense. It also introduces the concept of tortured individuals ascending into a sort of demigodhood, becoming beloved by the townsfolk for their closeness to Chernabog, but also becoming wildly unpopular to sacrifice, meaning you end up pulling sacrifices from an ever-dwindling pool. It provides the potential for some additional strategic depth as it removes some of the family members from play or makes them more difficult to sacrifice, but it also mostly muddies the water of the game's allegory of the village as a stand-in for actual religions and socio-political entities. Still, I really enjoy the game. It plays pretty quick, a full game is usually only a little more than an hour if you don't lose before that, and it manages to pack some interesting thematic meat into a game almost entirely through its systems without really leaning on traditional narrative elements. That's not to say there isn't any writing in this game, there's a fair bit, but the writing is used to contextualize and flavor play, to draw the metaphor out of the mechanics and make it clear what the game's about. And while there's nothing wrong with story-driven games, it's nice to be reminded of what a good old-fashioned, well-designed game system or two can really do to convey meaning once in a while.